That hair tie is the entire reason you're watching this video, because the title promised you a crowd going wild over a Nike gift, and the gift, when you finally see it up close, is almost nothing.
That was actually a surprise for me. Like, the message behind it was great. And I was like wearing my little flower. Oh my God.
It is the smallest possible object a multinational brand could have handed Alexandra Eala, and that, it turns out, is the point. The Sampaguita is the national flower of the Philippines. Worn on a wrist at Center Court, Wimbledon, in the summer of 2025, it became, for a community that almost never sees itself on the most watched lawn in tennis, the smallest possible flag. Eala didn't say anything when she walked out wearing it. She didn't have to. The flower said it. And in the year since, Nike and Eala have kept building on that single embroidered petal until what started as a hair tie has become the visual language of an entire diaspora's pride. This is the story of how a piece of swag became something else. To understand why a hair tie matters, you need 3 facts and nothing more. First, the note Nike sent with the original gift in July 2025 was written partly in Tagalog, not translated from English. Tagalog. The proverb on the card read, "Kung may tinanim, may aanihin." What you plant, you'll one day reap, per Tennis.com's reporting on July 1st, 2025. Second, 4 days before this video, on June 21st, 2026, Eala played the Eastbourne final and lost to Maya Joint 6-4, 1-6, 7-6 in a 10-point championship tiebreak, per ESPN, the second straight year she has lost the same final to the same opponent. Third, as of June 20th, 2026, Alexandra Eala is the WTA's world number 30, the highest-ranked Southeast Asian woman in tennis. 3 facts. A proverb, a loss, a ranking. That's the trellis the Sampaguita is growing on. Now here's where most sponsor gift stories get lazy, and we have to be careful not to. Because Nike is a business, the Sampaguita is, among other things, a very smart commercial gesture in a country of over 110 million people and one of the largest diasporas on Earth. A marketing team approved this. A creative brief existed. None of that is shameful. None of that is the secret villain of the story. The honest question is harder than villain or hero. The honest question is whether a gift designed in part to sell things can also carry meaning that the people receiving it actually feel. And the second, quieter question, the one Eala herself has to answer week by week on tour, is whether a young player can keep walking out under that flower without the weight of it cracking her game. Because the Sampaguita is light. The expectation it now represents is not. A nation is a heavy thing to wear in your hair when you're 21 and serving second on breakpoint. Tennis is supposed to be about feet and forehands. Once you stitch a country onto your wrist, every match becomes a referendum on something larger. We're going to hold both of those tensions through this whole story. The marketing is real. The meaning is real. They don't cancel each other out. They argue, and the argument is what makes the gift interesting. Start with the object, because the object is everything. On July 1st, 2025, Alexandra Eala walked onto center court at Wimbledon for the first time in her career to play the defending champion Barbara Krejcikova. She was the first Filipina ever to walk that particular lawn in a main draw singles match. In her hair was a Nike-gifted white hair tie with a single embroidered Sampaguita on it. The whole thing is small enough that on television you would have to be told it was there. Per Tennis.com, that was the original gift. And the smallness, again, is what makes it work. A big logo would have been a billboard. The Sampaguita was a whisper. The whisper traveled further. But the hair tie wasn't the whole gift. The note that came with it was the full text, as quoted by Tennis.com on July 1st, 2025, read in part, "Every dream begins as a seed. Kung may tinanim, may aanihin. And what you plant, you'll one day reap." A Filipina on the grass courts of history, not just playing for herself, but carrying a nation in full bloom. Read that again. A global apparel brand chose to speak to its Filipina athlete in the language her grandmother prays in. That is not the default. The default is a motivational quote in English. Nike here did something else. And then there's the flower itself, which has meanings older than any sponsorship deal. The Sampaguita, Jasminum sambac, has been the Philippine national flower since 1934. Its name, per multiple Filipino flower symbolism sources, traces back to Sampaguita, meaning I promise you. Filipinos string it into leis for graduations. Filipinos lay it at altars in Catholic masses. Filipinos give it at weddings. It signifies devotion, purity, fidelity, a vow made and kept. Worn onto center court, that flower is not decoration. It is a vow to the country, to the family, to the small Quezon City kid who once hit balls against a wall and decided eventually that this was the life. 5 petals, 1 promise. Take a breath here because the rest of the story is the petal getting bigger. What began as one hair tie did not stay as one hair tie. By early 2026, the Sampaguita had stopped being a private gift and started becoming an architecture, and the people watching it grow were not just tennis fans, they were Filipinos who, for the first time in living memory, were watching a global brand learn their grammar. In late February 2026, Eala flew to Oregon to visit Nike World headquarters in Beaverton as a global ambassador. Per BSCBN's Dian Castillejo, reporting from the campus on the 27th, and corroborated by Sunstar Davao, Nike had built a Sampaguita-themed display in her honor and unveiled a custom Nike by You in full bloom shoe, Sampaguita iconography on the upper U.S. Open Trophy imagery as a nod to her 2025 breakout, and a Philippine flag element worked into the design. The motif had escaped the hair tie. It was now an environment, a shoe, a wall, a backdrop. The flower had moved from accessory to architecture, and then the motif left the building entirely. In the spring and summer of 2026, per reporting circulated on Reddit's r/tennis and a Philippine Star Facebook post, Nike released a full-bloom t-shirt available in the Philippines carrying the same visual language Eala had been wearing in her hair. Filipinos started buying it. Filipinos started wearing it, which is the moment the symbol changed character. A private gift between brand and athlete had become a communal emblem the fans could wear themselves. The player and the people now shared a uniform. The flower was no longer just on her wrist, it was on theirs, which is exactly when the test arrived. Because symbols are easy to love when you're winning. The harder question, and the one this story has to answer honestly, is what happens to a national flower when its bearer loses. On June 21st, 2026, Eala walked out for the Eastbourne final against Maya Joint, the same opponent who had beaten her in the same final in 2025 when she had held 4 championship points and let them slip. Per ESPN, the 2026 rematch went 6-4, 1-6, 7-6 with a 10-point championship tiebreak deciding it. Eala saved match points. She lost anyway. Same court, same opponent, same outcome, 2 years running, and the Sampaguita was on her wrist for all of it. That, more than the center court debut, is what makes the symbol real. Anyone can wear a flower in a victory photo. The flower that means something is the one that walks off the court the runner-up and is still there the next morning. 3 days later, on June 24th, 2026, the WTA's official Instagram account confirmed something that put the whole arc into a different frame. Eala will partner Venus Williams in the Wimbledon 2026 doubles draw. The 21-year-old Filipina, who walked onto center court last summer wearing a stitched flower, will this summer walk onto a Wimbledon doubles court alongside one of the most decorated athletes in the sport's history. The Sampaguita doesn't need to be louder. The company it now keeps is doing the talking. The authority for all of this is on the record, and it's worth naming the receipts. The primary text is Nike's own gift note, quoted in full by Tennis.com's baseline staff on July 1st, 2025. That's where the Tagalog proverb lives, where carrying a nation in full bloom comes from, where the gesture stops being a rumor and becomes a document. Tennis.com is the U.S. tennis publication of record. The note is not paraphrased there, it's printed. The hero's own response is equally documented. On Instagram the day of the Wimbledon debut, Eala called the hair tie a reminder of where I come from and everything that brought me here. per tennis.com's reporting. That is the player herself, telling us in her own words that the object landed the way the brand hoped it would. For the Oregon visit, the eyewitness of record is Dian Castillejo of ABS-CBN, a veteran Filipino sports journalist who covered the HQ visit on the ground on February 27, 2026, with corroboration from Sunstar Davao. Filipino press single-region corroborated consistent across outlets. Tennis analyst Kevin Palmer, writing for Tennis 365 in March 2026, reportedly framed Eala's commercial trajectory as a sponsorship windfall as her popularity climbed, useful as outside the Philippines confirmation that the cultural specificity of the Nike relationship is being noticed by the tennis press, not just by the fans. None of this is invented. None of this requires you to take the narrator's word for anything. The note exists, the shoe exists, the shirt exists, the flower exists, the loss exists, the doubles partnership with Venus Williams exists. Everything else this video says is built on that foundation. Now widen the lens, because what's actually happening here is bigger than one player and one brand. The Philippines is a serious global market for athletic footwear, and the Filipino diaspora across the United States, the Gulf, Europe, East Asia is one of the most far-flung communities on Earth. For decades, the way that community has shown up in international sport has been through borrowed identities. A Filipino-American boxer wearing the stars and stripes, a Filipino-Canadian skater carrying the maple leaf. The Sampaguita on center court is something different. It is the flag underneath the flag. It is a Filipino-coded visual entering one of the whitest, most tradition-bound arenas in sport, and entering it legally. Because here is the design irony worth naming. Wimbledon's all-white clothing rule has for nearly a century and a half effectively erased national signifiers from kits. No flags, no colors, no country. The Sampaguita complies with the rule perfectly. The flower is white. It passes the dress code. It still tells you everything. That's not loud activism. That's a quiet design victory. And for Filipino fans on Instagram, on Threads, on Reddit, the response, documented across comment threads at scale, has been some version of the same sentence. This is the first time we've seen ourselves on center court. That sentiment isn't measurable in dollars. It is also not invented. It is the documented public response of a community that has historically watched tennis as outsiders. The Sampaguita made them insiders for a fortnight. It also costs her something. That's the part this story cannot skip. Because for every Filipino kid in Cebu or Dali City or Dubai who saw the flower and felt seen, there is a 21-year-old in a locker room in Eastbourne June 21, 2026, who just lost the same final to the same opponent for the second year in a row, 6-4, 1-6, 7-6 in a 10-point championship tiebreak. The Sampaguita was on her wrist for that too. The only verified words we have from her in the aftermath of an Eastbourne final loss come from 2025. Not 2026, and the distinction matters, so we'll mark it clearly. In 2025, after losing that first Eastbourne final to Joint, Eala wrote on Instagram per tennis.com, "This has to be one of the toughest losses of my early career, but I firmly believe that it's these moments that make you stronger and shape your character." That is her 2025 statement. We do not have a verified 2026 quote. We are not going to invent one. What we have instead is the calendar. Wimbledon main draw begins around June 30th, 2026. 5 days after the Eastbourne loss, the Sampaguita returns to grass. So what does she represent? Strip the ranking away, strip the sponsorship away, strip the Venus Williams doubles partnership and the Oregon shoe and the Eastbourne heartbreak away. And what is left is a small white flower on a hair tie. 5 petals, embroidered, about the size of a fingernail. Most viewers, when the cameras catch it at Wimbledon 2026, will see a hair accessory. Filipinos will see a vow, a promise. Sampaguita, the grandmother's words stitched into center court's dress code. That is what she represents. Not the rankings, which will move, not the trophies, which will come and go. A visibility, a generation of Filipino kids out in Manila, in Jersey City, in Riyadh, in Milan, who will grow up knowing that the first time their country's flower was worn at the most watched grass court in the world, It was on the wrist of a 21-year-old who looked like them. That's the legacy of the Sampaguita gift. Not what Nike spent, not what Eala won, what a child saw. If this video meant something to you, leave the word Sampaguita in the comments. Filipino, diaspora, ally, whoever you are, and follow the channel.